Well, thank you very much, Ken, for coming along and talking to us. Really appreciated. London's taxi industry is recognised around the world and seen as one of the enduring symbols of London. What are your own views about the role of London's taxi service?
Well, I think it's most probably as you say, a real icon for London. Everyone comes to London, they look for a red bus and a black cab. That's why I wasn't happy when so many of the cabs started having advertising on the outside. And the standard that's set is amazing. I remember getting in a cab in New York and asking to go to the Natural History Museum, and they dropped me on the wrong side of Central Park. The knowledge is, I know it's difficult, it takes a long time, but it gives so much more confidence that you'll get in a cab and the person knows where to go, knows the best and quickest way to get there, and that's why we fought all the attempts to downgrade the knowledge or just replace it with a sat-nav or something.
Every taxi driver in London knows who you are. Do you enjoy using taxis, and have you got a favourite taxi story?
Well, I use cabs quite a lot, mini cabs and black cabs. I live in an area where I most probably only see a black cab parked outside Wilson Green once a year in the rank there. But I suppose my favourite story is about a year ago, and I got in a black cab, and this was at Finchley Road station with all my shopping, and he went on about, I used to hate you when you were mayor, and I was so glad I voted for Boris and you lost, but I'm voting for you next time. Now that is my favourite story. I think this is after they closed the carriage office, and I never recall anyone in TfL coming to me and saying we need to close the carriage office. It was just, and I can't see why, because it was such a focal point and part of the culture of the cab trade.
Yeah. Taxi drivers spend their working lives on London's roads. What policies, if you are re-elected, would you introduce that you think would make life better for them and for their passengers?
Well, I think all that we do to encourage people to use public transport and reduce car usage. Basically, central London streets are always just below gridlock point, The congestion charge bought us a bit of time. But the scale of roadworks and the delays, I remember watching it look like it took 8 months on West End Lane, in that stretch between the three stations, to replace about 75 metres of gas main. It just seems to me, if you know you're going to replace a gas main, you order the gas main pipes, you dig the hole, you put them in, and then you fill the hole back in. And I'd go there, and you just, day after day, there might be one person working on this blocked off bit of road. And so I think we need to be absolutely rigorous. It's the next most important thing to make London work and people be able to get around, is to have a real crackdown on those utilities that just don't give a damn.
Taxi drivers' favourite question about them being able to or not being able to use the Olympic route network. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when we bid for the Olympic Games, we were told there'd been a real catastrophe in Atlanta, virtually no public transport in Atlanta, athletes missed the games and so on. And I have no objection to lanes that are there to allow officials that are running the games and athletes getting there. But we need to remember that almost all the athletes are actually in the Olympic Village. But what seems to have been more the reality, this is, for the sponsors, all the corporates. And I think there's a real resentment that isn't justified. And it was certainly, if I hadn't lost the last election, it's one of the things I remember saying to myself, I really want to talk to the IOC about this. It's going to be a potential PR nightmare for them. And certainly it's only a desperately short time of 10 weeks. But I'd want to review whether we can have not just black cabs, but buses using those Olympic lanes. And what I can't understand is why it's all been left to the last minute. I intended that in 2009 you would sort these issues out, as well as what you're going to pay the tube drivers and bus drivers to work through this. To leave all this to the last minute means, much more likely something's going to go wrong. And, the unions have got you over a barrel.
Taxi drivers are concerned about enforcement of touting, illegal touts, illegal minicabs. And the other thing that they're concerned about is their other favourite question about, is there anything you think we can do about pedicabs?
Well, if I had legislative power, I would say we wouldn't have pedicabs. I think they're inherently dangerous. They take up a ridiculous amount of space for the passenger miles that they actually produce. So I would just simply ban them. I think it might be that you have to regulate them so hard you get rid of them basically that way. But I mean, the touts are a much more serious problem, because that's where most of the rapes that happen to women after a night out in the town come along. And I think inevitably, Boris has now admitted that they've cut 1,700 police posts over the last 2 years, and I think the crackdown on touts is always the thing you'll keep the pressure on the police to do. There's always other things, policing the Occupy demonstration and all that, and it tends to slip off. I remember if I said I wanted to come on an operation, yes, it'd all get up and it's all done. You just got to keep that pressure on. And I suspect with the loss of police numbers, it's one of the things that slipped down the list of priorities, and I'd want to reinstate it. And I mean, I've given a commitment we'll refill all those 1,700 lost posts. So there will be the capacity there for police to actually do their job.
The taxi industry in London is based, as you know, on drivers with knowledge and high standards. Can the industry have confidence that if re-elected, they can continue to secure your support as mayor?
I mean, the good thing about this election as opposed to the last one is that people can compare my record with Boris's. Last time it was he just promised to match everything I was doing and do better. People can now see we've got less police. The fare increase has been horrendous, have really hit at people. I mean, things like the carriage office has been closed without any warning. I mean, Boris didn't get up and say, vote for me, I'll close the carriage office. And I think that's why this time he's going to great lengths to avoid debates. I mean, we had one in front of old age pensioners a couple of weeks ago, which he comprehensively lost. And he's agreed to do one more in March and one in April. Well, I'm happy to do one a day, because I think having records to compare. And there was a very good article in the G2 magazine, The Guardian, yesterday. But looking at Boris's record, and the conclusion is yes, you've got the most expensive cable car in the world under construction. He presided over building the Helter Skelter in the Olympic Park. He's got the cycle hire scheme where each bike and docking crane comes in at £12,000, and he's bought the most expensive bus in human history, but that's about it.
The government and the Law Commission are currently reviewing the framework for taxi and private hire licensing standards across the country. Do you agree with us that this is an issue that should remain within the remit of the Mayor, TfL, the GLA, and that London's very high standards should not be watered down to those of the rest of the country?
I mean, we're a great world city in competition with New York and Tokyo and Shanghai, and the standard you have to be in that sort of competition across a whole range of things needs to be better than just the average for cities that aren't in the centre of global attention. And therefore, the standards we set on things are absolutely crucial. And one of those is our black cab trade, which is known around the world. I mean, the Chinese government's now basically adopted the black cab for China and is building, no doubt, millions of them out there. I mean, we should hang on to that. The other thing is, I mean, everything I ever had to deal with in central government was slow, indecisive, and usually wrong at the end of the day. If it was up to me, it wouldn't just be that I'd keep the regulation of the cab trade in the mayor's office. I'd actually declare independence and run the whole city. But, that they can't run hospitals in London. I mean, everything government does in London, it gets wrong.
You've already been mayor for 8 years. It's obvious that you enjoyed it because you've thrown your hat in the ring again. Do you have a message, first of all, for radio taxis drivers, 2,500 of them, for the taxi industry in general, and of course the wider community, our customers, in other words, Londoners in general?
Well, one small thing which will help with congestion is we're going to bring in what San Francisco now does, which is people driving around San Francisco on their mobile phone will be told where the nearest available parking space is. And given what's happening in Westminster, that becomes more and more important. The big, multi-storey blocks, slots on the street, all done on a simple computer system. Because the mayor of San Francisco discovered that a fifth of the cars in San Francisco were driving around looking for somewhere to park. So that would be another small little thing that would help. Secondly, if black cab drivers vote for me, they will live longer, because we're going to tackle air quality. And black cab drivers must be just about the most vulnerable people, because they're there breathing in the fumes all the day. And there's a real danger that London is going to be fined £300 million because of our bad air quality by the EU. So we just got to tackle this. I mean, the government, all governments have been hiding just how bad it is, but we now know that at least 4,000, perhaps 6,000 people die prematurely a year. And by premature, you don't mean a few months, on average 11 years. So air quality we've got to do something about, and I want to see cab drivers live as long as possible to complain about my mayoralty.
Ken, thank you very much indeed, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thanks very much.